What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Plus. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to give you guys my review of Cobra Kai Season 6, Part 2. We got one part left, and I think Part 2 is much better than Part 1, and it's leading somewhere I think very interesting. We'll talk about that in this video. I want to go over spoilers. I mean, like, if you're talking about Part 2, you've already seen Part 1, and, I mean, if you're talking about Part 2, you've also probably watched Part 2 at this point. It's really good. I really like it. There's probably just one thing majorly, and then a couple minor things that I have an issue with. And beyond that, I mean, this chapter, if you would call it, I think moved very quickly, had a lot of things going on, and I think honestly handled it pretty well. And Part 1 definitely was more of like the setup. But okay, kind of want to just get into like major elements of Part 2. So, Part 2 is a lot of karate, a lot of martial arts, and, I keep saying it, but I think hopefully it makes it a little unique and original. Like, I'm a martial artist myself, so when I look at this show, I look at it for a multitude of reasons. I like the acting. I like some of the cheesiness, the corniness, but I like some of the themes and the lessons, and I mean, I think that's all a part of Cobra Kai and also Karate Kid. These movies and shows are not the greatest martial arts displays. You could go see many other things that are better in that way, but just the way that they kind of do the over-the-top stuff, right, I think is actually really good. And people like Zara, right, and I believe her actress is like a legit martial artist. You can tell whenever Zara is fighting in the show. I don't know about Axel. He's got an okay amount of form to him, so maybe he is too. But Zara specifically, the actress that plays her, she's like a world famous martial artist, an influencer, and other things. And you can tell when she does kicks, when she does punches, they're extremely crisp. They honestly make everybody kind of look worse, and that's the thing you got to be very careful with, I think, with this show. When you introduce like legit martial art, even like Louis Tan, right, who joins this part as kind of like a minion for somebody else we'll talk about, right, when you introduce people that are like rather good, then you kind of make everybody else, people like Dimitri, I feel like, he's a good character, but he's got absolutely zero form. I really actually don't like watching him fight at all. People like Hawk are good. Somebody like Miguel, I think, is actually, he's gotten really good as the seasons have gone. But, spending so much time talking about this because, well, there was a lot of tense moments in Part 2, and I want to talk about those as well. But it was a lot of fighting. I mean, like, half of the last episode was just the biggest fight you've ever seen in your life, which I thought was spectacularly done. I loved all the different. In fact, my wife was watching it from afar. She kind of likes the show, but kind of hates the show. And she was watching it from afar, like half in, half out. And she said at some point, she said, they should make it so that the senseis fight. Like, after the students fight, whoever wins or whoever, gets the next round, then there's sensei. And she was kind of saying it as a joke slash, like, she wanted to see Johnny, she wanted to see Daniel fight because they really, they've been a lot of mentorship and fighting each other verbally, but not so much like actual fist fights. Well, she got her wish because that fight involved everybody, right? You got all the villains involved. You got every freaking school. You got team ups that were not possible in the tournament, right? Like Tori and Robbie, they would fight each other, but they weren't going to fight together. Well, you got something like that, right? You got Chosen and Kim, who, had the thing earlier, but like, okay, you're never going to see them fight like that outside of that, environment. You have a cool Johnny and Daniel team up a little bit. I'm leaving out a particular person, I guess we might as well say, like, having Terry Silver back, I think, is really cool. There's a part to it where it's like, I hate how quickly they drop things. So, like, on that one side of things, like, Kreese, because I think they give the reason why Kreese is like in the clear in Part 2, right? Johnny, when they're doing like their banquet dinner, Johnny says like, well, what if I turn you in? And Kreese is talking about like a veteran PTSD who was wrongly imprisoned and he broke out for his mental health. And it's like, I really don't think that would fly. Like, Silver put him there, and you can maybe find out legally that Silver was the cause of it, but I don't even, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're put in jail, even if it's wrong, and you break out of jail, is that also not a crime? So it's like I hate that, because it's like I understand like wanting Kreese as a part of this. I think he's really good. The knife and the kind of themes that are going on there, and just everything that happens. I think everything that's going to happen in these final 5 episodes, like, very important. Like, you needed Kreese here, okay? But just the reasoning, I think, was really bad because it's so over the top. Honestly, same thing for Terry Silver. Like, I mean, how can you not put the guy in jail? And they get through it in like a second, right? They do the flashback where he's with his lawyer, and he basically says like Stingray was the worst witness. His somebody that was working with Stingray or helped Stingray in the court, he was also bad, so they just dropped the whole thing. It's like all of that, everything that Silver did in the last 2 seasons, he gets nothing for that. He just gets out just to, and now I wonder where he's going, because he's kind of playing this almost puppet master, like, behind the scenes. I liked the him and Kreese thing. Like, there's not much you can do when you have, Kreese's actor being, like 78 or something. Like, you can't have this highly cinematic fight, but, they did, I think, the best they could. Having Johnny fight Silver just for, like, a couple seconds, I thought was pretty cool as well. Giving Johnny somebody he could actually beat versus, some other stronger characters in the show. So I like that. I love Terry Silver. I think, in terms of the last 2 seasons before this, I think he really, if you didn't have him, you'd have a significantly worse show. In fact, I think the show is like really, really good, so maybe I shouldn't say it like that. But Silver, in a lot of ways, made those seasons. I think he was so freaking spectacular. And, I mean, the idea of what he's doing, I think, makes sense, right? This is the kind of guy he is. He's going to buy a school because he's got the money. He's going to use them, and then he's going to kind of take the praise and all that stuff. Now, where it's going and how it ties to Miyagi, like, how did he even know that Daniel was looking into that stuff, right? So he has, like, the packet. He shows that the Miyagi thing ended in death and all, but it's like, how did he? I don't know how he would know that in the first place. So I think he's more connected than we think he is, or that we know he is. And that's kind of the end of his story, because, everybody's going somewhere, right? And specifically at the end of this part, which we'll talk about in a second, like, you have to, I don't think you can keep fighting. I don't think you can keep the tournament alive, I guess I should say. I'm sure there'll be more fights, but in terms of the tournament itself, I don't see how you actually continue that. But again, we'll get there. I'm trying to think, like, is there anything else? I guess the one major thing that I didn't like, that I don't know if everybody would agree with, but maybe they will, maybe they won't. I really didn't like using CGI on Miyagi. I don't think that was necessary. I think it's probably more like the necessary argument than anything. Like, I don't know, CGI and the whole, like, bringing people back from the dead, like that, it's a tricky subject, and I'm more okay with it in certain situations versus others. I think for a show like this that has been so, like, it's been so specific, and they've talked about it over and over about, like, that legacy and the respect. And even, like, Ralph Macchio, right? Like, the stuff that they'll say in interviews. I've watched so many interviews, for so many years, on Cobra Kai, and it's like, to do that, you already had, like, that thing going. Like, he's fighting, like, this dream form of Miyagi, and he talks, and it's like, that's fine. All that stuff is fine. But then, like, when he knocks him down, and then they do the fate. Now, number one, it was really bad. Like, the CG on Miyagi, terrible. It was one of the worst, because, like, his mouth, it just did, like, it was really horrendous. So there's also an argument to be made that if you're gonna do it well, right? Like, if you're gonna do something like that in a show that's so specific about, like, preserving the legacy and all that stuff of the past, I mean, that's already a big weakness. But then if you're going to do it, or, that leads to this being a problem. But if you're going to do it and you do it terribly, well, that's also another issue. But I just don't think it was necessary. You had a young Miyagi. You already did it with, like, a Kreese and stuff in the past, right? Like, you don't need to superimpose, like, Martin Kove. Like, you don't need to do that stuff. So specifically with Miyagi, I just, when Daniel gets knocked down, I just don't think you make it CG and then you fix that issue. So that was just, my wife was even pretty, again, like, kind of half watching, half not watching. She was like, how could they do that? Like, that was just stupid. I agree. I don't think that was right. So that was probably the big, I mean, they rushed through some things, but so much of this part was about, eliminations and being right on the freaking brink of being eliminated. And there was also some really nice moments. I actually really like Kim and Chosen. I think that's a really cool pairing. And when Johnny and Miguel are on the plane, I thought that was pretty good too, where it's like Johnny's trying to like overcompensate, and you got that rich kind of elite type guy, right? That's making him mad. And I mean, you had like those kind of funny-ish moments, even like Miguel being the one to punch him and all that stuff, and then like the cops saying when they land and basically describing Johnny from the past, right? But I mean, that was a really nice moment to kind of slow it down and have some tears. Like, that was a really not for me, but for them, that was an emotional scene. Like, they were both very worried. Now, they completely rushed like the resolution to that, right? Because it's like they made you think she freaking died, which was also a weird choice. And then she's like, okay, I'm alive, and you have a kid now, but you need to go back and you need to win the tournament. And it's like, I don't know if they would actually leave in that circumstance. And they get places. I mean, I guess it's like a 13-14 hour flight. I don't know. It just, again, rushed, right? There's some parts to this that are rushed, but the plane stuff, I think, really it solidified the Johnny Miguel thing, because Miguel is right. Like, Johnny was so focused on Robbie and not on Miguel, and he was the one freaking carrying the team, right? That was another thing in the earlier episodes, like 6, 7, right? That Robbie's just he's letting the Tori thing get to him, which I think that's a cool dynamic. And I think the relationship stuff that's going on, like, generally, in the earlier seasons, I was really never about like the kids stuff as it got, even though they're a lot of the same ages as me, but they're supposed to be younger, right? But I was always into the more like adult stuff. But as the seasons have gone, they've aged too, so I don't think it's as bad. And I do like that kind of dynamic. But it's good to slow it down, have them have their tearful moments, and have some resolution, because you needed that for Miguel to then have to instill that stuff into Robbie, that like, hey, you need to pull yourself together, but you're a natural born leader. Like, there is a reason why you're captain. And Robbie ended up pulling through and doing all the stuff that he does in the tournament. And like I said, like, the fights in the actual tournament, some of them are better than others. Like, when somebody like a Kenny jumps out, I think Kenny's actually pretty good as well. It's weird, because it's like a mix of like, I'm very interested in like the tension. Like when Robbie is fighting Quan and it's 2-2 and it's like next point, like that team's out. Now the bubble kind of gets burst, because it's like, well, Cobra Kai's let back in because there was somebody broke the rules. So it's like that hurt. You could easily see that coming as soon as he kind of brought everybody together, I think. But I guess it doesn't take away in the, like, first time watching. Now, like, second time watching, it's not so much fun. But first time watching, when it's 2-2 and it's like, Jesus Christ, and they're so close to hitting each other, and then Robbie finally gets that final hit. When they all jump up in terms of, like, massive excitement, I was like, yes, you assume that Miyagi-Do was, because Tori was the only one really with Cobra Kai, right? So you assume Miyagi-Do is going to win and then have to fight off against Axel and Zara, right? Like, you figured that was kind of the end battle. So you kind of know that, but I guess, the show could do some other things, and it did, because that final brawl, wasn't, I think, in the planning. Now, again, in terms of over-the-top stuff, where was any kind of security? I mean, these are like the best you could say the best martial artists in the world would easily take care of security, but like the announcer guy, who I guess some people are like afraid of for some reason in this fictional universe, he's like the only one holding like the codes together, and then when he gets knocked out, it's just like game on. But if you take away the craziness for just a second, which I think is actually kind of easy to do, like, I kept laughing, and even my wife said, like, number one, where's any police? Where's any kind of security? Because it is like a sport event, right? Like a worldwide event, so it's like there would be security. But anyway, okay, you take that away, and you take away that they were filming the entire thing, right? That would be, I don't know, like, you don't really do that, right? I mean, maybe, but maybe you would cut away or something. So if you take that stuff away, that fight, again, I just kind of said in the beginning, but like having everybody have some iconic matchups and some fights and stuff, and being able to watch people, kind of swap in, swap out, I think was really, really cool. I extremely enjoyed it, and it kind of, it helped even story moments, again, because you had had Robbie and Tori, so like that helps kind of that theme. You had Dimitri and Hawk, right? So it's like you're doing some almost like story character resolutions in the fights. You're kind of blending it in, which is smart to do in a show like this, right? You have Johnny who knows that like Kreese is going after Silver, so maybe he's originally going to stop that, but Silver's destroying him, probably because of the age difference, and Johnny comes in to help him. So you have that kind of, because that I assume is gonna do something in the future, right, with Kreese and Johnny, because Johnny did save him in that moment. So, I really love that. And then, of course, there's the elephant in the room, is they freaking killed the character. So Quan dies, and honestly, I did not see that coming. The knife thing, I mean, they did a really good job, I think, of like kind of passing mentally like what you think is going to happen. So like first, like the whole knife thing is kind of, it's stolen from him, right, by Chosen, then Chosen gives it back, and then, he says it's over when I say it's over, and it's like, okay, well, what is he going to do? Like, is he going to kill Johnny? Because like, killing Silver, I don't really think does that. Like, you have to kill like a judge to get Cobra Kai back. Like, what do you have to do, right? So, like, that didn't really make sense in the moment. But, when the brawl breaks out, it's like, okay, he sees his chance. He goes after Silver. And you think that first. You're like, oh, my dear God, like, he's going to try. And, I mean, I really think that was possible. Like, in that moment, I was like, yeah, Silver had his time to be, like, the ultra villain. He's kind of one of the villains now, but he's not, like, the supreme, right? So, it's like, he really could die. So, he's going after him. And then, once, when Kreese got, like, bumped into a couple times, I did think the knife fell. So when he went to pull it out and they did the flashback type, I wasn't surprised on that. I figured the knife had dropped. Then when Quan picks it up, I really did think he was going to kill Axel. I think that I mean, I don't know what you would do in terms of like villainous, because Quan would like go to jail because he murdered somebody, right? But like, I just felt he's so unhinged. He lost, right, to Robbie originally, and he's getting destroyed by Axel, and he was kind of 50-50 with Robbie before that. So he has a knife now. He's just gonna kill Axel, right? And then he ends up landing on the knife. Now, just one quick thing I guess I want to say in terms of a theory. I'm going to assume that something like that is what killed Miyagi's competitor back in the day. I'm not saying he falls on a knife, but I do have a feeling that Miyagi didn't actually take somebody out. And if he did, like they could go either way. If he did, it could be, well, he learned. Like, he was so aggressive back in the day, and he learned from that, and he evolved and changed, and he taught Daniel all of these lessons in Karate Kid to not be like him when he was a kid, right? So I that's one way, and I could easily see it because it's just kind of like that theme of like changing and bettering yourself and stuff. Or the person could have taken themselves out in some sort, or he slips, or Miyagi punches him and he slips and hits his head or something like that. Like, I could see that happening too. I just feel like all these things are going to connect at some point, right? But that rough. I mean, we've never seen that before from anything like this, right? So it's like losing Quan. It's a shock in the moment. I mean, like, okay, well, once he does the kick and like Axel kicks him and he falls, it's like I kind of assumed he fell on the knife, and then he screams and all that. Seeing everybody's reaction was also kind of sad. Or even now, I was kind of focusing more on the villains, right? I mean, you could look at Johnny's reaction or Daniel's reaction, right? But I was looking like Silver actually did look beaten up about it, so like I'm interested to see where that goes. And Kreese looked and he should, right? This is the start, because he's talked about, like, in real life, he's talked about that he actually gets like a redemption, or he turns it around. This has got to be it, right? Because the knife, he brought the knife. He brought the knife to do something with the knife. He probably didn't know what at the time, but he brought the knife to take somebody out at some point. That knife made it into Quan's hands, and Quan died. Like, You've got to change. Like, that's got to be something that changes you. And also, Johnny saved him from Silver just a few seconds before. So that has got to be the start of him finally snapping out of it. It also doesn't hurt that Kim is not like a massive supervillain that's kind of one-dimensional anymore, because of Chosen, and in even some questions she was asked from Tori of like, do you actually want this and stuff like that. She's turning around. Kreese will turn around, I imagine. And then it's just Silver, right? Does he do anything, or is he the final villain of the final 5 episodes? I'm not sure. But so that's kind of how I looked at it. Like, it was emotional. It was something, I think some of the conversations, like the plane thing, were actually more emotional. That was more shock value, but it worked. It's more like, how dare you end this here? Because now, I mean, like, doing it into parts, they did a very good job of, like, where to break things up and what to introduce at each part and keeping twists coming. Like, the Silver thing, I don't really think that was something I thought was going to happen. I wanted Silver to come back. I said that at the end of when I reviewed last season. I wanted Silver to come back. But, when he does come back, you're never fully going to be ready for it, right? So it's like when he's in the hot tub or whatever, it's like, and they do the music, the piano, just kind of like kind of madness type theme that, is his theme. I freaking love that, right? So it's like those moments definitely caught me. And this was losing Quan. That's a shock value, but it's also, okay, this is it. And I forgot this. I want to throw this in just in case you guys are still watching. Well, the other moment that actually got me emotionally was when they were talking about this being it in terms of like them as a group, fighting Cobra Kai one last time, and they do their kind of inspirational speech, and they're all kind of crying, right? And then Daniel and Johnny come in and say they were going to do a speech, but that was probably the best scene. Although like the fighting is that right there was like family, you know what I mean? Like that's what Vin Diesel talks about. Like that was really good. Honestly, that was extremely good. So like those moments, and that's why I really like this mid-season thing, this part, because it had the over-the-top action, which I think was actually quite good. It had a shock. It had a couple twists. It had a huge shocking thing at the very end, and it also had some really emotional and kind of starting to plant the seed of like, this is goodbye. And now like these final 5 episodes, this is it, right? So it's like I was really happy with how this part went. Miles better than part 1, and I'm very excited for part 3, and I'm very mad that I have to wait 3 more months, late February, whatever it is, so 3 months from now, to watch the final part. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.